So hi, I'm Nicole Timble. I lead a community of employers who are working on economic mobility for their frontline and lower income workforce. And so this conversation, how do we move from looking at these external metrics that sustainability's done so well to yesterday, so many of the conversations here were about internal metrics. And we're gonna shift that a little bit to being like, what stories do we tell externally? And I just wanna say, like, Deborah, I'm so grateful to be here and to be with all of you. So many light bulbs went off about how this world of economic mobility and diversity and inclusion and a lot of corporate responsibility work, they want you and they need your help in order to make the business case about why their work is not just good for the world, but good for the company. And so that's what this conversation's about. I just want to start by just like putting the elephant in the room out there. How many people think that like Patagonia and Walmart are a little different? You know? So what are some of the ways that they're really different? Let's just put it out there. Size, what 2 point, how many employees?
Between 2.2 and 2.4.
Employees.
Million.
I mean, just wrap your mind around that. And?
3,000 globally.
All right, what are a couple other ways that they're really different? Products, customer segmentation is different. Perception, brand, headquarters. How about number of outlets or number of retail locations?
11,000.
72.
And then the last one, that's what I was going to put out. The last one I'm going to put out there that's really huge as an organization that works with both of them is ownership. So who owns you?
Our shareholders.
And we're still owned by the Chenard family.
And private. And so the flexibility in how you talk about this publicly. So you both have been leaders in sustainability. I'm just going to give you a second to talk about how you have led in sustainability, because I'm not sure. I think people might know some pieces of the story, but I would love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So how many of you are familiar with Patagonia? A bit? Okay. So the company, that would be one of the things we have in common. How old is Walmart?
55 years old, roughly.
See, we're like 50. So we were buddies in high school.
Exactly.
Is that right? Okay. So 50 years ago, Patagonia, to some extent, has evolved into a company that only exists for sustainability. So the mission of the company is we're in business to save our home planet. If we're not doing that and impacting climate change and finding a way to not just impact it, but to reverse it, to make it a better place, clean air, clean water, free-flowing rivers and wild places for your grandkids. I don't know if we've done enough in time for your kids. They may have a hard time, but maybe for your grandkids, we can fix things. But that's the whole reason. If we weren't doing that and moving that forward, then we would close the doors of the company tomorrow. So the only reason the company exists is for sustainability reasons. And so we measure that in a variety of ways, but we're actually incorporated as a B Corp, which means that we have, in addition to financial results to our shareholders, which is the family, we are liable, like legally liable, to move forward our responsibility to both people and planet in addition to profit.
It's interesting to start with the purpose of the company, because I think that's something we share. Yeah. Our mission is save people money so they can live better, and a huge amount lives under the live better part. And we talk about sustainability as an essential part of fulfilling that purpose, along with the ways in which we invest in human capital. So how you build out and really build this, I always talk to people who sit in my role, which is a bit of philanthropy, a bit of kind of company advising, and make sure like your work is not an extracurricular. And there are a lot of companies where this work is an extracurricular. And I think we both share that we're in companies where it's part of the core. And it's really part of the mission, and it's on the C-suite's mind, and it's on our board's mind. We spent time with our board yesterday. So those things really do distinguish, I think, where companies are on a journey. Sustainability for us started probably in real material ways about 20 years ago. Lee Scott, who was our CEO at the time, gave a speech about sustainability, lining out to be zero waste, to be 100% renewable, and to sell products where people don't have to choose between sustainable and affordable. And it really was saying sustainability needed to be democratized, that it wasn't something just for the elite. This was going to take all of us. And that journey has been, I think that was very nascent. We were probably pretty naive to what that was going to take, and how hard and big these problems were going to get. But it was also a strong case, being a publicly traded company, that this was good for the bottom line. And so from the very beginning, saying, I think we've gotten even more committed to that piece, and even more, it's rare that a big company like Walmart writes an editorial, as we did this week, and says we believe in climate change and we're still in on the Paris Agreement. Like, as silly as that sounds, as silly as that sounds, a publicly traded company often doesn't disagree so publicly with an administration, right? And those kinds of things. And so we really do believe that while we made cases around short-term value creation in the early days, we now also talk about long-term business viability due to sustainability issues. So I'll stop there.
And that's a really good point. I mean, I guess Patagonia's belief is, with no planet, there is no business.
Exactly.
Like, if we continue the path we're doing, and you guys can do the billions of dollars that climate change is costing business right this year, you can see it in the news. It's every day. That there is, it's going to be tougher and tougher on business with the impact that's having on climate change now. You can't separate the two.
And you've both done an incredible job, both inside your companies and inspiring externally, or shifting supply chain externally to meet these needs. Publicly share your sustainability metrics, your sustainability goals, your achievements. Just as if there's no planet, there's no business. If we continue with the income bifurcation that we have, there aren't people to buy your products. And so in many ways, human capital is becoming the next sustainability to investors. How are we, and this is where you all really come in, because the analytics shops for years have had to be reporting publicly to investors on carbon, on climate. That is starting to shift to being about human capital and to being about economic mobility. And so my question for both of you is, like, what have you learned from having to report on sustainability that you couldn't parlay to human capital for the folks in the room who are going to be the ones who need to be reporting on this publicly?
I'll let you go. I do want to mention one thing. Walmart and Patagonia have been working together on sustainability for years. Yep. So this is one of the other things that we have in common. We were just talking about this morning over breakfast, but there's a group called the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and which is, how can we make clothes more sustainably? And we were pioneers, both co-founders of this. And then we were also talking this morning about likely the way to save the planet is through agriculture. And both of us, top of mind in terms of making an impact, is on regenerative ag, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And there may be, in terms of sustainability, a lot more things in common with both Walmart and Patagonia than you would likely think. We share a lot of the same goals and are actually in partnership.
I think that's right. And when it comes to what we've learned, we actually have, and for anybody who's really likes to geek out in this space, you can go read an article that our team wrote in the Stanford Social Innovation Review, about kind of our emerging beliefs on what good ESG measurement looks like. So good environmental, social, and governance metrics, which is the idea we can measure these things, we should be reporting on these things, and there is value in really saying to the external world, and investors specifically should be asking these questions.
Can I ask, how many of you, part of your position is to help report on ESG metrics? Interesting. I would bet that's
I would guess in 5 years, most of the hands will be up. If we've done our job well, most of the hands will be up.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So, what we've learned is we have kind of 6 principles that we're learning, and they may change, but they're kind of our starting place. And I have them in front of me because I can't always get all 6. Ideally, there'd be 3. Focus on the most material things for the business. It's where you can have the most change. It's where you can like really drive things. And those are not just for the business, but for society. That leads to something that means you probably think about industries and control for size slightly differently. When it comes to something like carbon, retail and banking are not the same. And so that's kind of a second principle, which is really think about who this company is, what it looks like, what its shape is. You also want to make sure that you're looking apples to apples. So something like retail, it's very different whether people own their supply chain or not. It's very, and on both sides of that, most of the material impact in retail is in the production. As Dean and I both, we often, but almost all sustainability measurement doesn't get to that unless you own it. And so there's very little incentive to work as we both are in things like agriculture. Because we just sell that. That's somebody else's problem in an ESG metric. And so you really want to think about the total ecosystem. It's also, we own all of our logistics and delivery, or the vast majority of it, because we optimize for it. And we really are trying to build it sustainably. Until recently, that was really unique among our competitors. It meant our carbon scores were really high compared to others. But it also meant ours were decreasing much faster because we were managing for it and really optimizing for it, while others had no idea what was going on because it wasn't part of their contract process. So these things about like really what's the shape and style of the business, where do they fit in the ecosystem, all are important. And then the last one I'll mention is that you want to not just measure negative externalities and kind of risk pieces. You want to incentivize value creation. And most investors, even in the sustainability space, still think about measurement as risk mitigation. They aren't getting to value creation. It is about, is this company going to have a big blow up that impacts my share price? Not about what kind of long-term value can they create because they're better positioned in this and they're solving the problem.
Yeah, that's so true. Now, for Patagonia, if we just take the traditional metrics around sustainability, you can look back pretty far on the Footprint Chronicles. We've been pretty upfront about and transparent through our entire supply chain down to the factories and what water is coming out of the factories and what dyes they're using for our products. And we don't own any of the factories, but we go deep in the supply chain and then we literally will tell you where we are failing, and even on human trafficking and that issue in a lot of factories in Asia, and which factories that we're involved in that we are well aware of that are involved with human trafficking and what we're doing to make that stop. And what that means is basically people working in the factories, they take their passports and then they get stuck in the factories. And we are in the factories inspecting and doing everything we can to make that stop. But it is a part of how the factories work.
If you're consuming things from Southeast Asia, you
all are wearing something that was done by labor that was traffic labor. You all have something in your closet that was some level of that. So that part of it we work on. We're a little bit new to the game, other than some of the work we've done in the factories on the social side. And we're working on this. So if you want to get some metrics for your group just to start messing with it, Patagonia uses B Lab because we're a B Corp. There are 45 indicators of human capital metrics that are pretty deep and very intense. And what we've learned is on the social side, in terms of impact, it is really difficult. So for example, how would you make sure we're paying a living wage in the factories in Bangladesh? What is a living wage in Bangladesh? I can tell you what it is in the U.S. because MIT does a ton of work to tell us what the living wage is in the U.S. As a matter of fact, it's the only country that you can get a really good living wage score. You can't even get a living wage in Canada. Like that.
By county.
By county. It's really great data, but it doesn't exist for the rest of the world. So we have to fudge it. And we have to make that up. But as more companies are interested in doing this data would become more available. But it's an important question. And is a living wage in the U.S., like what is poverty in the U.S.? What is poverty in Bangladesh, and what is that number? That's a really difficult question to answer, and that's what we're finding in the B Corp or the B Lab report that we have, which we've done for several years now. And to your point earlier, Caitlin is highly involved in the B Corp. As a matter of fact, there's a couple to-dos in your email box. On that. So and it all has to do with the B Lab working on human capital metrics and they do this for a living. They have lots of scientists who are kind of thinking about this that they have gotten wrong. They're like, well, maybe that question or that word wasn't the right word, and we're all measuring the wrong thing. Let's go back at this again. Or what is this? What is a good score? So it's very, very new, even for places that are doing this well. But if you want to see the future of what could be on your reports, even on a public basis, look to the B Lab, and you're going to see lots of human capital metrics. Some of them are going to make sense. Some of them you're going to go, what is that? But a lot of them have to do with mobility, living wage, and doing the right diversity, equity, inclusion questions as well.
And their tool's really easy to get on their website. Like you can get, without being a B Corp, you can look at the tool and the questions.
Yeah.
I do want to take this one edge further on this, something else to think about. And this, think about how the business model of Patagonia around sustainability inspires what we do in the human capital side. And I mentioned regenerative agriculture a minute ago. And Patagonia, as you know, makes really incredible clothing and apparel. And by doing that, we are destroying the planet. But we try to do it in a way that destroys the planet the least. Among all the things you could buy, probably Patagonia stuff destroys the planet the least and has the lowest impact of everything. We're very hard on that, but it still is like killing the planet slower, which we're not super proud of. Our mission is to save the planet, and our mission is not to kill it slower. And so we are likely Patagonia 50 years now would be a food company, and here's why. I'm going to give you, anyone familiar with what regenerative agriculture is? Of course. So here's how regenerative agriculture works. Traditional agriculture works where you till and you slice, you put a seed in the ground, you cover it with dirt, and what happens with the seed is this microbial community begins to grow around the seed so it can reach out its roots into the soil and pull the nutrients from the soil into the growing plant. The plant grows, it goes into the air. When it breaks above the soil, it begins to pull carbon out of the air and deep into the ground and puts it into the ground through the roots. So it pulls nutrients from the soil, but at the same time, it's putting carbon back into the soil and forming this community and actually putting nutrients back in the soil and sequestering carbon. At the end of the year, we all slice into that. We get corn or soybean or whatever that we need. And when we slice into the ground, we kill this microbial community. And all the carbon that was sequestered goes back into the air. The number one contributor for carbon is agriculture. Number one contributor. If there's another way, though, if you just didn't till, you just put the seed back into that rich microbial community. You left the carbon in the ground. And if the whole world went to no-till farming, regenerative agriculture, you actually don't need as much water. You don't need pesticides and fertilizers and all those things because the soil is alive and can protect itself. We're basically farming on dead land. By this whole till and poke, we are killing the soil. And most of the topsoil is actually dead. There's nothing in it, because we've extracted all the nutrients from years of tilling. But if just left it alone, we would have the soil alive. My point on this is, if the whole world went to regenerative ag, we would actually begin to reverse climate change within decades. We'd actually save the planet, which is why Patagonia is moving towards this. So I thought about this on the people side. A lot of the work we do in HR is focused on what are we taking out of people. What did you contribute over the past year? The annual performance review is exactly that. What was the crop yield of this plant for the past year? So you have the annual, I think the annual performance review feels a little bit like the slice and till moment at the end of the year for the crop. Everyone's like, but we actually, Chris did a program and worked with a local organization to measure the impact of a benefit that we put in place. And we measured productivity, we measured engagement, all the things that are on your typical things. But what Chris and Channel Islands also measured was, what is the impact of this program on your relationship with your spouse? What's the impact on the relationship with your children? What's the ability to go to the doctor? What's the ability to buy healthy food? We ask questions about what does this benefit put back into your life in a regenerative nature? What are we putting back into people's lives? And what we found, this is really a simple benefit. We just closed the office every other Friday and went to a 980 schedule. So we work 9 hours a day and close the office every other Friday. Not a big deal. But the measurement was the big deal, the analytics behind this. And what we found as a result of this benefit is people overwhelmingly reported that they had better relationships with their spouses. Overwhelmingly reported they had better connections or relationship with their children. They were able to spend more time outside. They were able to go to the doctor, because I don't know about you, my doctor is not open on Saturday. So if you think about for people who are less privileged, I'm a salary person. I have the privilege of being able to go to the doctor and just step out and go to the doctor and come back. I don't have to punch in, punch out. But if you're hourly, this is a difficult thing to get to the doctor or take your children to the doctor. When you're off every other Friday and you're closed, you have the ability to do some of these things. And the ability to buy food and get to the market. It's the first time we measured not what we were extracting, but we measured what we're putting back into people's lives. And we've begun to do this even around what do dogs, we did a dog survey recently. Caitlin did one, and to understand the impact of not just how dogs impact productivity on campus, but what do they put back into people's lives. Universally, even if you didn't have a dog, people were less stressed at work by the ability to bring a dog. They were happier. My challenge is, one, is don't just measure productivity and engagement. The engagement is like the annual extraction survey. Like what are you willingly giving us in discretionary effort? But what are we putting back in? So every once in a while, throw in, what are we putting back into people's lives instead of just what we're taking out? How can HR and human capital be regenerative in nature and not just extractive? And just a thought for us of our future.
No, that's amazing. And everybody in the room is on your website looking for jobs right now. I want 26 3-day weekends and bring my dog to work, please. And this idea of what do you put back in, I think it goes hand in hand with what you said, Julie, about value creation. And so many times when investors, institutional investors in particular, are looking for value creation, they might not be looking for the right thing. So kind of a two-part question. What human capital metrics are you using that are to show value creation? And what do you care about? What do you think? How do you think you're creating value for your communities, your employees?
So I do think this is a really important point, and most of you have probably sat with somebody at some point that talks about all the human capital stuff as a cost. They in front of the public talk about HR as an investment and our most important asset and various things, but then it's managed as a cost versus an asset. And even that language matters because it changes how you think of people. It's humanizing. It's all the things that we want to see in the world. And a lot of that does have to do with GAAP accounting principles and various things that really do on a balance sheet drive that today. And there, many of you have probably been following the movement to change some of that so that it sits in a different place and is structured in a different place, which I think would be helpful. Walmart has as a core strategy the creation of shared value. So we believe that it is a business and a management strategy and that we build stronger businesses by solving social and environmental problems. And when you kind of look at a single slide on our business strategy, the creation of shared value is kind of the bottom line and what we say we exist to do. In the human capital space, we use a framework that I think, and Nicole, you and I were emailing a little bit about this, is fairly globally relevant. We haven't tested that fully. We definitely use it in the US. That is access. So who are you hiring? And, for somebody that has a frontline workforce, how are you eliminating barriers to entry for those who often are locked out of a formal economy? Things like banning the box so you hire ex-offenders, people without a degree. All of these things can be real value creation. There's a whole lot of reasons people are excluded from formal employment that have tremendous potential. and are overlooked for kind of social or various reasons. And so we think about what can we do on access, because one of the things we have is a tremendously large front line. We can be a point of entry in the economy in a way that makes sense for us, for people who might not be able to start in other places. And we hear that over and over again from our workforce. I have applied to jobs for years and nobody gave me a shot, and you gave me a shot. So looking at that and measuring that. And it's different in every country, but there's always somebody excluded from the formal workforce, and really thinking about what your role is in that. Then there's a piece of, okay, you now have a job, you've hired me, what's the stability package? And that's stuff you've all looked at. That is often wage, benefits, various things. But I think your point about not just, the basics, but what do people need? And a lot of listening to really make that right. We added, we're one of the only companies that we don't have bifurcated benefits. So it's not like the home office has one set of benefits and the front line has a different set of benefits. So that, a cashier can have up to 16 weeks of maternity leave. These kinds of things are unusual, but how you think about that for retention, how you think about that as the value it creates for working moms. These kinds of things are really important. And really listening to your workforce to think about what's the suite of stability metrics that make sense for you. Scheduling is something we've worked really, really hard on to make sure that, because guess what? Everybody doesn't want the same schedule. A college student working for us wants a different schedule than somebody who is raising 2 kids. And so how are you building scheduling models that are both, for people who want set hours and predictability, that's great. And you have that option. For people who want my schedule, I am your second job. And really I'm a fireman and I need to pick up hours this way. And building a system that really works that way and measuring what it does to retention. Because that's always a good way to get shared value out of it. So stability, depending on your workforce, and then mobility. And we really do think about that. And that's a set of lifelong learning pieces. It's a set of training. I think, John can speak to this probably even more in depth than I can, but how that not only drives retention, how your business is stronger because you were able to hire more internally, promote more internally, how your training systems allow the company to move faster when change happens, and reinvent themselves more quickly, is all value to investors that is not typically attached to investment in the front line, particularly in training. And that's been underinvested in for years. And we are spending huge amounts of money on training at the front line, and how you really help people think of this as something that benefits associates and our employees and benefits the company. And always making sure you're really thinking about both and making sure it works in both instances.
That's great. So this frame of access, stability, mobility is really important. One of the things we've learned is that stability, the same best practices that create stability, scheduling, benefits, the things Julie talked about, are the exact same best practices that create mobility. They are not different. And so to be able to retain your workforce, especially a lower income workforce that has more barriers to stability, that's the same best practices, and we have a list of those. So one of my questions for you both, because there's incredible value in retaining your workforce, right? I mean, 4%, that might be...
It's unusual.
It's unusual.
4% turnover at our corporate office, but about less than half at our warehouse of the industry average, less than half of the industry average in our stores. So our warehouse is at 7% turnover, which is ridiculous in a warehouse environment.
And so in order to reduce turnover, you have to be investing in frontline low-wage workers or lower-income workers. What are some of the innovative things that both of your companies are doing, and we'll open it up to questions after this, that you're really proud of that's helping create that stability and mobility?
I didn't do this at Patagonia, but I would talk about it all day long. And if I had known about it before I joined Patagonia, I would have talked about it a lot longer before this. And if you've heard me talk, you know that I'm going to talk about this. And so how many of you know what is the return rate for women after they have a child at your company? What's the percent of women that drop out of the workforce after having a baby at your company? Well, same as her. Yeah, okay, got it. Okay, cool. Okay, so nationally, this is just an average, and I realize there's more and less on this. 25 to 30% of women leave the workforce after having a baby within a year. 25 to 30%. Repeat that. A third of women leave the workforce within a year after having a baby. Why?
They leave the work.
They go home. They go home. That is exactly it. So Michael is saying it's hard to balance having a child and working and the emotional decision. And you've been in HR a long time, and I have absolutely seen women on their first day of work bawling that they have dropped their kid off at childcare, and they are crying because they're like the emotional decision around, I have to choose between work and my baby. So, that's a U.S. number. Again, to challenge of statistics, the U.S. is a little better at that, but this is a U.S. stat. Yeah, this is a U.S. stat. It's a huge cost.
Opportunity cost is real.
It's a huge cost. And so there's study after study, and this is not, people can choose to do what they want, but talks about the benefits to women and the benefits to children of breastfeeding. If your child is not on site, you cannot breastfeed. If the child is at a daycare center 10 miles away or wherever it is, you can't leave work, drive 10 miles, breastfeed your baby, and do that 3 times a day or however many times a day you need to do that. It's impossible. And it's a freaking nightmare. Oh, well, that's exactly it. And then, the pumping rooms are usually great condition if you can find one, or you can sit on the stall in the toilet and pump. There's always that option. But then if you're traveling, then what do you do with the milk? Because you can't store the milk in the fridge in the hotel because you can't store breast milk. My point is, at Patagonia, nearly 100% of women return from leave. And we measure that. We look at it every single year. Women return from leave at Patagonia. And it's a simple thing. We don't make them choose between their baby and their kid. So when women come back from Patagonia, they have leave. They still have, leave, but they're stoked to come back. And I see this, and what that means is when I started at Patagonia, they asked about, the Obama administration asked us to sign up for the Parity Pay for Women pledge. And of course we signed up for that. And I'm like, oh crap. Do we pay women fairly? I have no idea. I've been so Chris, give me a number on that. So we looked at the number, and we pay women at pay parity at all levels of the company, at all levels of management, with the exception of one, the executive level, where women make a little bit more. So things that Patagonia does systemically. So women return from leave because there's childcare on campus because they can, and so they can breastfeed. It's encouraged. I've been to a board meeting where there's someone breastfeeding in a board meeting. I don't know if you saw Holly Morissette's post. We were having an HR meeting a couple months ago, and she, in the middle of the meeting, she brought her baby because she couldn't. She's a recruiter, and she couldn't get back to childcare, so her baby Bodhi was with her, and she just started feeding Bodhi at the meeting, kind of covered, and I looked at Holly and I said, "Wow, what is the ROI on that?" And so she posted that on LinkedIn. So the next day she posted her experience and said, "I'm just so thankful that I don't have to choose between my baby Bodhi and my career. I'm just glad I can do both of these at the same time." She posted on LinkedIn and just said, "I'm just thankful." Next day, there were 2 million views of that. And now it's running at 6 million views. And if you read Holly Morissette's LinkedIn post, I guarantee you cannot read the comments without crying. You cannot read them. So my point is, if we want mobility for women at work, we talk about gender parity, we have to let them bring their kids. And even things that we do are not that big a deal. It's not used that much. But if you're traveling for work, we'll let you bring the baby. We'll pay for a nanny. And so the mom and the nanny go and travel and do the meetings that they need to do. And what this means is women have equal opportunity as people who don't have children to progress in the company. It's why Jenna Johnson, who's one of our executives, who's had 2 kids at Patagonia, raised them all at the company, and she is one of our leading vice presidents. Chris also did some pretty interesting understanding of like, what is the pay for people who've worked at Patagonia a long time, because we have no turnover. So it's kind of a unique petri dish of like, what happens when women are in environments for a long time when they can bring their kids. And we notice that the women that we have to fix are the women who come from other places. Like women who've been at Patagonia for a long time are paid at the same level as men or other people at Patagonia. It's everyone else we have to fix, the new hires we have to fix. So anyhow, I look for opportunities to fix the system, and you can fix the system by measuring these things. What is the return rate for women at work? What is the promotion rate for women at work? You probably know that one. But my point is we have to, and then when you're working with your HR partners, change the system. Because as long as we have a system where women have to make that choice, we're going to still have 25 to 30% dropping out of the workforce, and they can't have the same level of opportunity. And you can't. And so I see that in movement and see elevation of women. And we just, there are systemic barriers that we have to change.
No. The warehouse?
We provide it for the warehouse also. So I'm saving that answer for what do we do uniquely? So it's not just for the corporate office. We also have it in the warehouse as well. And we've seen, and we subsidize it based on living wage. So we look at what is the living wage and the cost of childcare, and we subsidize the childcare for warehouse. And we've also seen impact in mobility, impact in retention rates for women at the warehouse. And it's a simple thing. It is there is an ROI on it when you do the long-term value of it, but it's a direct correlation between the mobility for women.
Yeah, thanks. And we don't have a ton of time left, but Jill, you guys do so much at Walmart, and I think a lot of it's like the best kept secret in human capital. Do you want to share a few?
Sure. So we started what we call a transformation in the human capital space 5 years ago. And that investment is now over $4 billion in wages and education and training and scheduling and all the pieces, because this all fits together. And we are seeing decreases in turnover and a number of things from that, both measurable and things that just are, belief we're changing faster and staying ahead of the curve because of this. One of the things that I think is unique is the training and development work that's been done. So we know everybody at the front line gets pretty significant training. It starts with a program called Pathways. It then goes to a program called Academies. We've built 200 training institutions around the country, co-located with stores. You spend about half your time in the academy and half the time in the store walking and learning. There's VR in every store now where they're learning and using that to learn. And then that leads to a program. What we're seeing is a lot of the people we train have never had success in education. We are an access employer, so a bunch don't have high school degrees, a bunch don't have, and frankly, that often comes with a feeling that I can't be academically successful. And what we're hearing anecdotally is these academies make people realize they're really smart. Everything's taught on iPads. They're learning digital skills. They graduate at the end of it, and in many cases do caps and gowns and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it changes the trajectory of what people want to do. So materially in the academy space, we can say that people who've been through academies have higher retention rates, and those who report to them have higher retention rates. So you see that impact. But then we have what's called Live Better You. So thinking about a full continuum of learning, which is a college and a credentialing program in which they get to choose what they study. We have a set of degrees and credentials that have been chosen because we know they're going to be valuable in the future work context. And everybody who's on that platform, it's done through Guild Education, which I know others use too, is known for serving working learners well. So you get on there by having high completion rates for working learners and high low debt rates, all those things. You can go for $1 a day. So that's how Walmart does this. It's not a tuition reimbursement program because that's almost impossible for somebody who has limited income. It is $1 a day and you can get a college degree for that. Or a number of other things. You get a coach who works with you weekly. It is designed, and we measure it by completion. That is the kind of North Star that we've driven, is not that we have high enrollment numbers. We're early in the program, so right now it is measured through enrollment. But what we really are holding ourselves accountable to is the completion of the degree, because we know that's where the value comes in. And then once you're done, there's no requirement that you stay with the company. We really believe that we want Walmart to be a job that you are better for. And that's both with us and, frankly, we do hear anecdotally our competition is hiring from our academy graduates and all of those things. And it's a belief that the whole system will be better because of it. And we're such a believer in that. When we announced the transformation, we announced not only what we were doing in the company, but through philanthropy, we're investing $100 million in tools and systems so that all companies can think like this. It's things like the work Nicole does at Talent Rewire, where companies like yours can go through, get advice on this, because we think the whole system will be better if there's a greater investment in frontline training, skill building, mobility, all of these things we get benefits certainly from doing it for ourselves, but we think the whole world will work better if that's just normative.
We don't have a ton of time left. What I love about this is that I think we all know that talent is equally distributed, but opportunities aren't. And what you've found is that many of the people who work for you have just not had the opportunities, but through your programs, they realize they're really talented. And you are building versus buying in a very expensive market right now. Absolutely. Yeah. Which I think a lot of people in here were talking about yesterday. Just to close, because I know we're running out of time, right? We're running out of time? We don't have time for Q&A, do we? Oh, we do that. Okay, so to close, so I know that if I were sitting in this room, that I'd be like, oh yeah, Walmart can do that. They're like the largest employer in the world. Or like Patagonia can do that because they like let their people go surfing. So there's a whole book about it. So for the folks in the room who might think like they couldn't do this, what's a piece of advice? Because I know you both have like seen lots of other companies and worked with other places. What's a piece of advice to get started?
Start somewhere. I mean, what I would say is Dean and I have both mentioned a ton of things that have positive ROI. In a tight labor market, you won't get a better shot at this. So like, do it now, because there's not a company who's not more focused on talent in a tight labor market than they are when it's not. And so, you have access to the data, which is an amazing ability to really think about what is the metric you want to move. And what are the programs that you've seen out there, and the places like Talent Rewire and others where you can get kind of basically free advice and free consulting.
Walmart underwrites for other companies to get the support to do
to start these initiatives. So there's it's a pretty good pitch to go in and say like, I found this metric and I have this program that's free, and I think that we'll be able to design a pretty low cost program to move this metric, and it'll have positive ROI. What I find is once you start those things, companies get addicted to them. They start thinking differently. It doesn't take, you start doing it in childcare and suddenly you're thinking about something else. And so like, don't feel like you have to take on everything all at once if you're a small company, or don't have buy-in from the C-suite. Like, take on one thing, really build it in a smart way with shared value as your intent, and measure both. You'll catch the attention of somebody who'll say like, could you do more of that? What should we think about next? And it'll start, I find in good companies, and you all work for good companies, it perpetuates itself.
So I would say the same, start small. So Patagonia Childcare started in a backpack. It was just a backpack. Like, so someone who said, I'm bringing my kid and I'm coming to work, and it was in a backpack. So it just could be that small. And I think the other part is the best advice I ever got around making change, and it applies to how we're thinking about human capital. Actually, didn't happen at Patagonia, although I've learned a ton about it there. It actually happened at Sears. And at Sears, we had a guy on the board of directors who was on the compensation committee. His name was Paul DePodesta. And if you've been here before, maybe you've heard me talk about Paul. But Paul, if that name may not be familiar, the character might be. He was the Jonah Hill character in the movie Moneyball. So he was the analytics guy in Moneyball. So we had the opportunity to talk with Paul because he's on the board and kind of understand things that he learned about analytics in baseball. And I don't know what the exact question. I'm sure it was a dumb question, and he like reframed it with a super smart answer. And he said the thing that we learned is when I got into baseball, everyone was measuring all the things that were on the back of the baseball card. Like all analytics were done with things on the back of we were all like getting super smart and analyzing everything that everyone had that was data. It's all the data that's available in your HRIS. That's the baseball card. And he said, Dean, the real value that analytics can bring is measuring the things that no one else is measuring. Like if you're measuring the same thing that everyone else is measuring on human capital impact, then you're going to get the same result and the same information that everyone has. It's the same baseball card. There is zero competitive advantage in measuring all the things you can see on your HRIS. None, because everyone has one, especially the companies of your size. And you've got dashboards and fancy things that look at all the things and they find the things that no one else is measuring. Look for the space in between. Maybe it is. Maybe it could be what is, or how are you improving a relationship with your spouse or kids? Or I have no idea. But think about those things and then report on those. Maybe it's the subnote in your next analytics report. But look for those parts. Like ask your question, what are we putting back into people's lives and what does that mean? How could we think, what is a regenerative piece of analytic data that I could put in? Maybe in the next one they ask about pay and opportunity report, you look at how women are moving through the organization, how many are dropping off and why, and as it could be after they've had a child. And I just look for things that you're not measuring is my message in that, and it was a message from Paul, and I thought it was brilliant, and it stuck with me for a very long time. So this is how you guys can implement and impact change, because you can see and you can measure, and believe me, the insights that your head of HR is dying for your insight that's driven from data because it's the thing that the CEO believes in and the board believes in. So if I want to make change around women or kids or the future or sustainability or economic mobility, then it all starts with a good case with data. And certainly there's all the heart, and I can talk about those things all day long. But I mean, how many times has Caitlin heard me say, "What news insights do you have for me?" And she's smiling like, "So I'll get you one." And that's my challenge for you. What are you bringing to the table? What is your research saying? Measure something that no one else is doing, and in the space, and that's where creativity comes from, and that's real where change comes from.
I love that. The one thing I will add is if you are in a company that is not measuring turnover, and I was shocked. I'm not a data analytics in HR analytics. And the number of companies I talk to that are very large and sophisticated companies where they don't have a kind of agreed upon, everybody believes it, cost of turnover, and they're using some broader one, like that will unlock so many things because then you have an ROI, then they actually start to say like, oh, this is the way we're working is expensive. And we can do better, and you'll get them to a higher value. But if you can get them there, it flips the switch on like we should solve some problems.
Can I double click on that? Turnover by level. Well, turnover by level, by gender, by race, and by socioeconomic status using zip code. Mind blown. Like there's no denying what's going on in your company if we do that.
And I want to mention one other thing on the opposite spectrum. How are you measuring the impact of your elders at your company? What's the impact of your elders? What happens to your elders at your company? Do they kind of pushed off the cliff in retirement? So there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom in your elders. And by the way, they're going to get elder-er. And we all are going to be elder-er. And we are going to be working as elder-ers. And so think about what's happening to that workforce and how you can measure the impact of that workforce and how you can think differently. We do a damn good job of, intern, entry-level job, and you ramp up your career. And we do a terrible job of how do you ramp in a different way with our elders and how do they want to work differently because they don't want to work the same. in this time, and there's going to be a ton of them, and we are going to be them. Don't fool ourselves. So anyhow, that's another challenge in metrics and human capital and mobility, and what is the opportunities you're giving for elders, because actually you're going to need them in your workforce given the demographics that are coming.
Well, Dean and Julie, this was a huge treat for me. I hope for all of you as well. We hope to do Q&A, but there'll be time. I know you're sticking around for a little bit, so thank you.